sitting there, I just thought it was a masterpiece. And it just demonstrates that Trenton still makes. But let me say I'm thankful and honored to be a part of tonight's program, and my job is to kind of move things along. And I would ask you all, Mr. Steele has a tight schedule tonight. We're going to try to take as many questions as possible. So we ask that you would frame your questions and not get into a long dialogue. We ask that you be respectful. We know that politics can be somewhat emotional, but tonight we want to represent our city in a very dignified way. And I ask you to be courteous and, again, frame your questions. And I had the privilege of knowing Mr. Steele for some time now, and he did a tremendous job in the state of Maryland as Lieutenant Governor, and we have a long partnership with the National Black Chamber. But with that said, I'm going to start it off. I have two softball questions that I like to pitch to Mr. Steele and then the panel, and we'll move on. But my first question is, one, why did you accept the invitation? And then the follow-up question is, we all witnessed tonight a number of the candidates at that time articulated strategies that they would deploy if they were elected to secure the African American vote. And as we can see today, nothing much has changed. I'll start there.
Okay. With me?
With you.
With me? All right, excellent. Well, first off, let me say what a pleasure it is to be here and to be a part of this evening, and to see so many of you who've come out, not just to support, I think, two very fine filmmakers and who have put together an extraordinary documentary and have captured the other side of the story between the party and African Americans. But I think also in your own way to give testimony to the part that you have played in this story. It's not necessarily captured on film, it's not necessarily written about in newspapers, but it is part and parcel of what has sustained and made and pushed the GOP, and quite frankly both parties, within and without political activism. So I really do appreciate seeing all of you and being a part of it. In answering your question, I want to pick up for a moment, if I could, where the film left off with my election as chairman of the Republican National Committee, which at that time I said very boldly, and those who have known me for years know that I don't suffer from hyperbole. I just do. I just get out. If I've said I'm going to go through a wall, I'm going to go through a wall. If I've said I'm going to knock down doors, I'm going to knock down doors. And in that speech, I looked at the audience and I looked at the country through the lens of the camera and said that we were moving forward as a party. And you had two choices. You could either walk with us and push with us, or you can stand in front of us and get knocked over. And that set the tone for what would be a tumultuous 2 years. Because I'm here to tell you there were a lot of people who did not want us to move forward the way we needed to move forward. And there were a lot of people inside and outside of that building on First Street that had an agenda that had nothing to do with anything of growing, advancing, and promoting the principles of a party that I've been a member of for over 33 years. And so it was profoundly eye-awakening for me to see and to revisit in this film a lot of that journey that led up to that moment on that stage. And then to see on the other side of that coin, if you will, how serious the party was not in actually opening itself and being the big tent that Ronald Reagan said we are. It was very eye-opening to me to see how ill-prepared the party wanted to be in addressing the concerns of communities that did not look like the typical Republican. As I like to say, and as I told friends at the time, the idea of a Michael Steele as chairman of the Republican National Committee slammed into the reality of a Michael Steele as chairman of the Republican National Committee. And I learned that from individuals like Ed Brooks and Kim Blackwell and many others who had gone before and who were moving with me at the time, who were going through those doors or trying to slam through those walls and move this elephant in the right direction. So it was quite a journey, and as you probably read, and we don't need to get into all the horrors of the underbelly of Republican Party politics, certainly during my time as chairman, let's just say that you get to a point where you say, okay, now I know what the playing field actually looks like. I know how to move on it, and I know what to do with it. And I'll let those who want to play their games the way they want to on the field do what they need to do. But our mission does not change. And we set out, and I think that a great epilogue to your film, when you do part 2 of this, would be that I listened to and took into my heart and into my actions a lot of the lessons that were talked about in this film, a lot of the things that needed to be done. To watch Catherine walk through that race in Georgia, I can tell you that once I ticked off the establishment, my money dried up in my Senate race. And they were ticked off because of the position I took on Katrina. So the reality of it is, for me as chairman, was to be able to turn the table around as quickly as possible and to move the party in a new direction. And we did that to the extent that we elected 2 African Americans to the United States Congress, in Congressman Scott and Congressman West. We elected African Americans to the state legislature in Texas, African Americans to city council positions in various jurisdictions around the country. And it's because we made the investment. We created within the institution, the RNC, a Department of Coalition in which we funded it to the tunes of close to, well, over $1 million. We invested in building a network across the country of coalitions that would tap into the Black Chamber and tap into the Black church and tap into organizations where we would find people of color and diversity, and we tried to express our republicanism through those organs and through those institutions that they were familiar with and that they were already involved in. And so it becomes a big part of the next steps of what we have to do as a party and how we have to really be serious about what we believe and who we are, and how we take that to communities that don't look like us, live like us, have the same experiences that we have. And I think that's the strength, and it always has been the strength of the Republican Party.
Kevin and Tammy, in terms of once you finalized the film and then had a chance to kind of debrief it and watch it as you watched it tonight, what is your reaction then at the conclusion and then now presenting it in front of your community?
Wow. It's incredibly humbling in a sense, being able to present it in a much different way. A lot of folks in the room know me personally, have been involved in different civic issues. Seeing it with you guys tonight is so different than seeing it with folks in Rochester, New York. But from the end of the movie, getting it to this point, it's just, it's interesting going to places where you don't know anyone and they see your film and react in different parts that speak to them versus what I think by standing in the back and trying to observe your reactions and hearing comments. I think it's registered with you guys as an audience and you as individuals, and I'll probably hear more about that going forward in the future. Tammy and I both, we want to hear that. But being able to show you, particularly the growth of the film from the beginning, when we started off with Trenton as the inspiration and why we were so frustrated here and so outnumbered, and it was swimming upstream like a salmon with 50 pounds of concrete. And in our opinion, going through the film, if we don't have the party come in and obviously get more involved, the Trentons around the country really don't have a chance. And I think by seeing it with you all, hopefully you've seen our perspective certainly, but also I think hopefully from seeing the film, you see that there are possibilities of working with each other and working together and getting beyond labels.
I guess when you're in the editing room and you're making all the decisions, and I'd come home at the end of the day and see sort of what had happened throughout the whole day, and there's a million little decisions that get made, and you think it looks pretty good, and you think it's holding together, and you think it makes sense, and then you realize that it makes sense because the 100 other hours of footage that's out there, and you never really know if somebody coming in from the outside will get it. And we actually had some of our friends who got to see the 3-hour plus version. I think you all will be glad to have seen the 111-minute one. But it's been really great to get out there and to show it in different, here, but also in different cities. And it's really gratifying to hear from people that, we got it, or, it was their experience that was on the screen, or even it wasn't their experience, but it made them think. And so it's really a wonderful feeling to go from all these little minute decisions you make, in a vacuum, and then to be here with everybody is great.
Okay, I'm going to open up for questions, but I'm just going to share one perspective from my side as being someone that ran for office, but also president of an African American chamber, and being true to our mission. And this is the results of being true to our mission. We had a nonpartisan organization that we said we would play right down the middle. We have to engage both sides. And as a result, we're here tonight. But when I ran for mayor the first time here in the city of Trenton, there was a lot of rumblings across the city that the John was a Republican and therefore don't support him. So what we did was we put Democrat across our materials to try to neutralize the hits that we were taking on that side. And it's unfortunate because this is supposed to be a nonpartisan community. But the reality was, if you know a Republican in Trenton, it's not good if you're running for office, I tell you. So I'll start in the back with a question.
Hi, I'm Peter Ewell, and I am a Republican in Trenton.
Can I approve this?
There's a phenomenon, and I have friends from way back when, and a young lady who I refer to as my first wife, who lives out in Hayward, California, is black. And we get into this whole thing of a phenomenon such as, Mr. Steele, you're black. You're a Republican. No, you're not black. Mr. Harmon, you're a Democrat. You're black. Yes, if you were a Republican, you would not be black. You're a Republican. You're not black. I have problems with my vision. I look at both of you and see you both as black. What is that?
Oh,
That's a lot. That goes into a whole different set of identities and how within the Black community we categorize and in some cases ostracize for whatever purpose or reason. There's a whole lot of dynamics there. I think though, when you really break it down, it boils down to a perception that has been allowed to germinate into a poison within the community that says that, and it was captured in the film, I thought, very well, that Republicans don't care about our issues. We are, in some respects, ignorant of our own history and the relationships that we've had with both parties historically. I still remember the look on the faces when I was running for lieutenant governor and when I was a county chairman even. Growing up in D.C., Washington, D.C., when I would talk to my friends and I would let them know that all they had to do was ask their mother what party their grandmother belonged to or their grandfather belonged to, and I bet you 9 times out of 10 it was Republican. Oh, no. And then you had to educate and inform and help people appreciate that while you may be a Democrat, you are part of or from a Republican lineage in many respects. And that the political home of the Black community is the Republican Party, and there's nothing in history, fact or otherwise, that can take that away from us. So why not appreciate it in the context of how we position ourselves today politically as a way to leverage our interests against what both parties want, and that is the vote. As I said recently, because I'm from Maryland and we love the water, and I said to a friend of mine, I said, look at it this way. You've got 10 brothers, we out on a beautiful sailboat one day. And we're out in the Chesapeake Bay and we're just having a good time. And then we decided to all line up on either side of the boat based on our political affiliation. And all 9 of you brothers lined up on that one side of the boat, and I'm on this side of the boat. What do you think is going to happen to the boat? The boat's going to capsize. If you consider the boat to be your interest, if you consider the boat to be the political parties, if you consider the boat to be a tool for you, if you line up all on one side of that boat, the boat capsizes. So therefore you lose the opportunity to push your interests. You lose the opportunity to have an impact on the parties in the process. And so you have to find ways in which you can begin to break down those stereotypes about the Black Democrat versus the Black Republican, when the common interest is Black. And how do you leverage that Black Democrat and that Black Republican to act on the broader interest of the Black community? And as was said over and over and recounted over and over in this film, be held accountable to that interest. Because right now, neither one of us are.
Next question.
Hi, my name is Steve Geisert. Kevin, or actually for anybody, but mostly I'm thinking of Kevin. Right now we've got a vibrant Republican campaign going on right now for president. And I'm curious what you think, what kind of progress has been made that you were seeking in the making of this movie from the time you finished filming the movie until today, November 12th, 2011. What kind of progress do you think has been made at your goal?
Wow. I think a huge opportunity was given away with the last election of the current chairman of the Republican National Committee, who I don't believe has any interest in people like us who live in cities. I am encouraged what's going on with Herman Cain in general, but he also came from the Tea Party. When we were filming in Georgia, I was down in Georgia, you cannot believe, I had $1 for every person who said, do you know Herman Cain? Did you interview Herman Cain? Did Herman Cain go to your film? And that's 2006. He's got very impressive credentials. I think he's pushing the party along, or reminding the party that there are folks out there. And I think he can be successful. Not as much as he might think, 30-35%, that's not going to happen. But the good aspect of that is, as long as he keeps out there, he keeps talking, he keeps diversifying the party. But I'm not kidding anybody or just putting any wool over anybody's. I'm a huge fan of the man sitting at the end of this table. And Tammy and I, when we saw the speech when he got the chairmanship, we were high-fiving each other. And it wasn't just because he's in our film. When he said, to my friends in the Northeast, we're coming. That's why we have, whether you like him or not, a Governor Christie and a Scott Brown, senator from Massachusetts. And that didn't happen before. I don't know the insides. I know from a lot of Southerners and Midwesterners I've talked to making this film at CPACs and the inaugurations. There's a lot of money, there's a lot of support that goes out west and down south that did not come to the northeastern part of the United States until this man became chairman.
Next question. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Charles Hendricks, and I'm a community activist as well as a resident of South Trenton. My question is to you, Mr. Chairman, Steele, is that, personally speaking, do you feel that at the time you were elected to the chair of the Republican National Committee, that it was a token election, or was it that based on your ability and your wisdom and knowledge of politics?
Both. Honest answer, both. I think, let me put it to you this way. What was different about my election and why the Democrats had a very hard time, and even some Republicans had a hard time putting it all in the token box? I was a county chairman, I was a state chairman, and I was an executive committee member of the RNC when I was the state chairman. Governor Gilmore, and that's why I appreciated his being in this film, and of all those folks would have believed if he'd gotten the nomination to become president, it would have been a very different situation. He was the first one that broke that barrier on the RNC. It was the first African American to serve on the executive committee of the Republican National Committee as a young chairman. So I had long roots in the party, both locally and nationally. So the members who were doing the electing knew me. I knew all of them. They knew I was a grassroots guy. They knew when I said the Northeast were coming, they knew I meant that. And in fact, what galvanized so many of them around my election was the idea of someone coming in and breaking down this good old boy network, this old system. I made no bones about that. My first week, I fired virtually everybody in the building. It pissed off a lot of people in Washington because that's how they had their fingers in things. And so the members wanted that. But underneath that was also this idea, okay, we got a Barack Obama over here, we do you one as well. We got a black chairman. So I get that. So for me, the opportunity then becomes fine. Okay, I don't care why you put me in the job. Because I'm going to do the job I think needs to be done. So it didn't matter to me. I don't care what your motivation is. Because if I'm given the opportunity, and that's why I was straight up with folks when I gave that acceptance speech. I told them straight up where I was. I never once hid a thing from any of the members or anyone listening in the country that I was going to be a different kind of chairman. First trip I made as chairman of the RNC was not to sit down with a small cadre of folks and figure out how we're going to redivide the pie. It was to Harlem. And I had members come call, write, email, and behind whisper, why is he going to Harlem? What's in Harlem? Oh, I knew we shouldn't have elected a black chairman. I went to Harlem because that's where the votes are. I went to Harlem because that's where we needed to be. That's an entrepreneur. You know what's going on in Harlem right now? Why aren't Republicans in there every day talking about how this entrepreneurial spirit represents a core value of our party? And as Republicans, we're going to stand with you so that you have ownership, so that Harlem is not gentrified and you're moved out, but you actually own Harlem. That's a powerful message that we should be taking. And so that played against this idea of tokenism, because all of a sudden there were tangible things that we were doing that showed, well, if it started out tokenism, this brother sure isn't a token, because he is moving the pieces on the board in a way that it is really ticking off the white establishment of the GOP.
One other thing, to Kevin and Tim, you did a magnificent, wonderful job with your film, and I'll make sure I leave here tonight with the copy.
Thank you very much.
So like that.
Christmas and Hanukkah are coming, you know.
Kevin?
Good evening, Kevin Moriarty of Trenton. Kevin, Tammy did a very nice job on the film. And whoever on your public relations team arranged for Herman Cain to run for president just to promote your film, it wasn't a stroke of genius. I think that the film did a very nice job of showing on the tactical horse race level the lack of connection between the view from the top of the party and the lack of support to candidates on the ground. The sequences with Catherine Davis were just very, very moving and very effective. However, on a philosophical or strategic level of the film, and also from what I see from the Republicans in the news for the last couple of years, and also I speak as a committed Democrat, I didn't quite see the case. The case was not even really made other than on an occasional illusional basis why African Americans would be attracted to the Republican message. Certainly can see that African Americans have often and too long been taken for granted by the Democrats. And there's probably a great deal of frustration on that level, because African Americans probably feel that they're the last authentic Democrats from the New Deal coalition, that traditional Democrats have been, too wishy-washy. Can you make the case now, if not in the film? Why should African Americans be attracted to the Republican Party?
Well, my initial answer is, so you wanted the 3-hour version? No. No, to be honest, we purposely stayed away from actual policy discussions. We had a bit of it in there. At one point, we were toying with it, but we felt that it distracted from the core of what we're saying. And we don't expect this movie to be the be-all and end-all on the subject. I seriously hope that people kind of look at it and say, all right, there's something to explore here, and I'm going to explore it my way, and we can have a discussion. So we didn't put it in there. I'm sure if you Google Catherine Davis, you'll find all kinds of reasons as to why she's a Republican and conservative. But we purposely wanted to keep the actual just the talking points, because then it would look as if it were making the point and trying to convert people, and we don't really want to convert people. If all we got was, I'd love to see more Republicans in the city, but if we got good Democrats running, and I think you can appreciate a desire for good leadership in our city, that would be a plus.
It's one of the things, I'll just jump in. Right from the get-go, we knew we didn't want to make a Michael Moore film.
Yeah.
We didn't want to make a film that half the country or half the political spectrum would say, there's no bloody way, whether you buy my ticket, popcorn, soda, and the jujubes, I'm going to go see your film. And then also, even in making it, when we tried to initially meet with producers, if they're left-leaning producers, they wanted us to make a movie showing George Bush killing kitty cats at midnight. And if they're from the right, they just wanted us to beat up on Democrats all the time. And that wouldn't have been the truth either way. So we hindered ourselves in the sense of we had to make this movie on our own, pay as you go, do it as you can. But at the end of the day, we've made the film that we wanted to make, and a film we hope appeals to people from both sides, so we actually can have a discussion and a conversation. So we deliberately made a point in not having, wave the flag, vote Republican, this is why you should. That was pretty deliberate.
in words of the candidates themselves. I think
Yeah, that
something
came
I-
through, yeah, thank you.
Well, and if I could piggyback onto your question for a second, because I think it is a very important question that I was glad to see not answered in this film for this reason. It goes to a little bit of what I encountered in my first few weeks as chairman, and I made up my mind very quickly to do. And it's part of, before I become chairman, I had written a book, 12 Steps to Defeating the Obama Agenda. And it was really less about actually defeating the Obama agenda as much as it was recognizing that we had to deal with our own problems internally first. I can't come out and tell you that you belong with us when you're looking at us and going, well, y'all some dysfunctional sons of guns over there. You know what I'm saying? So we have to deal internally. We had to deal with the fact that we lost in 06 and 08. And there was a reason for that. It had nothing to do with anything other than the fact that the party had moved away from core principles and the base was ticked off. Similarly, this film, gladly, is less about why you should be a Republican and more a recognition that Republicans have to say, make with themselves first, that we have an internal thing we've got to work out before we can go out and convert people and ask people to join us. Because if you look at someone like Catherine running, or you look at the four of us who are running statewide, the backstory is, why didn't you support that sister? Why didn't you really get behind those candidates? What was it that was missing that would have allowed them to win so that they could be the representation of the party that you claim you are? So those things have to, this film I think moves that conversation before we get to yours, which is ultimately the most important one to have, because that's, once we're together and we got it right, then we can go and engage on that policy, those ideas, those principles, and stand toe-to-toe with Democrats who are going to fight to hold on to that vote while we try to move that vote.
Next question, thank you.
Good evening, Minister Lee Ingram. I'd like to thank you as being one of your students, taking your class. And it's amazing how life replays itself, because 3 of your students have went through some things in this year. One of your students, you had a nephew killed here in the city. Cedric Ashley, the attorney, represented me in a malicious arrest case here in the city against the police department. And we all took what we learned from that class, and we made a little film. We may make a little film about it. But my question tonight was, I was driving for Touch of Class limousine service, and they had every limousine service down there. And the one question on every black chauffeur's mind was, where were we at? All through Philadelphia, we made a pool. All the Touch of Class drivers, we made a pool. Whoever can find the biggest group of black Republicans wins. When we went down to the stadium, one guy won because he found a group of 5. And that was the biggest group of black Republicans that we saw. And we were wondering why. And as I got into the political realm myself here in the city, I see why we're not in a Republican Party, because we don't matter to a lot of people once they're in the position. We are good enough to help elevate a candidate, but we're not good enough to be around that candidate. And my question is, me, myself, as an independent, walking around, learning from both sides, because there's some things going on here in Trenton. A lot of people are disgusted with a certain party. What can you offer the people of Trenton on the Republican side, information-wise, that we can spread, grassroots-wise, to help further the support of the Republican Party?
Well, I can't speak for the county chairman and our municipal chairman, who aren't here tonight, I believe. But what I would say to you is this. And I'm not going to dodge your question. I think they have a lot to offer in the sense of if they come in and explain what they can do for the city of Trenton, as far as taxes, development. We have developers who are dying to get projects off the ground, encouraging bringing more jobs into this city because they have to get entrepreneurs to start up. One of the biggest opportunities, as you saw in the film, 3,000 abandoned properties. How many African-American contractors could start off with one house, get that done, move to 3-4 houses, come into where I live in Mill Hill. I have an ugly property, 231, 233 Jackson. I've been looking at it for 12 years now.
Feel free.
Feel free. I'll help you. I'll help you put the Christmas wreath up. But what we need, I'd say, from a party point, and we're always filmmakers first before activists, is getting more people with the word Trenton on their driver's license to go to a county convention, to go to a county meeting and say, we're here, we want to talk. You better start listening to us. Because what happens in our city, and we have a lot of friends who are Democrat, who we love dearly, and we get along with them quite well.
And they came out tonight.
And they came out tonight, thank you for the support. But we need to start making their party sweat. We need to start making, as a city, they shouldn't have that 14-1 and think, okay, it's going to be easy Cake Street. They actually have to start producing better and more results.
In 2008, there were 36 African American delegates to the Republican National Convention out of 4,000. One of the goals that I had set as chairman within the first 6 months was a conversation with every state party chairman in the country that the 2012 convention had better have more than 36, and I don't mean 37. African Americans. And the goal then, as part of our coalition department effort, was to begin to identify activists, volunteers, individuals within the community, and get them involved and ask them to be a part of our ongoing effort, not to go out there and say, oh, I'm a Republican, but just be engaged to deal with the social, economic, political issues within their community so that they can get known, so that they can be made aware of by others and to others within the community, so that when the delegate selection process starts, which begins this January, we could then begin to identify and have ready those individuals that we would ask to be a part of this. Such individuals, to your point, Kevin, would also already be now part of the political environment here in Trenton and elsewhere in New Jersey, moving the ball so that when the elections, whether they're municipal elections, local elections, off-year elections, whatever they happen to be, you've now built a ground team of activists who are known by the community and could potentially be candidates, could potentially be spokesmen and women, but also are now part of the Republican effort and could be at our convention and be a delegate or an alternate at the convention. This current administration has dismantled that department and no longer exists within the RNC. So that tells me that I suspect we probably will have 37.
There also are quite a few committee positions available in Trenton. How many, Peter? Rough idea?
95%.
Yeah, quite a few. Chances are it will be an uncontested race, so.
Yes, sir.
My name is Darrell Brooks. Been active in the city for like 25 years, since I was maybe 12 years old. Ran for the U.S. Senate twice. I'm also the chairman of the head of the Greater Trenton Tea Party. And I understand how you feel when they say you're a Republican. You imagine living in a Democratic house and the Tea Party. I want to thank Kevin and his wife for making the film. I remember me and him had long discussions at the CPAC convention, and that was wonderful. Growing up as a Democrat, and you asked this question, and when you realize the things that have taken place, specifically in New Jersey, we have Trenton, Camden, Newark, all Democratic controlled cities, and they have completely failed the failed jobs, prisons. I know what to do, but what would you think the idea of what should happen when you keep voting the same type of political politicians in that have completely failed? What kind of message? Because there's something's very seriously wrong with individuals that keep voting for the same politicians that lock you up.
Okay.
Yeah, schools, failure of schools, and they say, okay, go for us another 4 more years, and everything is going to be all right.
Well, let me ask you a question. What's the alternative?
You're right.
What's the alternative? Look, folks, the reality of it is very simply this. Democrats have controlled urban communities since, oh my gosh, I can't even begin to think. Great Society days, the late, mid-1960s. The evidence is there. You've cited them, from jobs to education. Right now, our nation's unemployment is at 9%, but black unemployment is at 17%. And I don't hear one person in this country from my community standing up and saying to this administration, what the hell are you doing? I look at Detroit, I look at South Central, I look at Baltimore City. They have been run by the same establishment Democrats forever. And yet I don't hear one voice within the community say, what the hell are you doing to our kids, to our businesses? So what's the alternative? The alternative is at some point, and it's not necessarily Republicans, but within the community, people have to say enough's enough. I think that's a great opening for black Republicans. I think that's a great opening for Republicans to lay out the indictment and to say, okay, you've had a failing public school system for 40 years. I'm asking you for 4. To give me a chance for 4 years. And if I screw it up, you won't have to worry about my running for re-election. I will step down. That's a bargain. 40 against 4. When I ran for lieutenant governor, that was the argument I made. And I think that's the argument that we can begin to make in places like Trenton. That it's not partisan, it's not political, it's personal. Because my kids live here next to your kids. I shop at the same store that you shop at. So what makes you think that I'm getting a better deal than you because I'm Republican? My kid's getting a better education than yours because I'm Republican sitting in the same failing classroom? No. And I think if you put the argument in real personal terms to show you're vested in this too, just like this community is, you begin to open up the mind of that person to the idea that, oh, okay, I'd always heard Republicans wanted me to be poor. Or Republicans hated my public school system. Or Republicans hate unions. Do you know that there are more Republicans in unions in this country than not? Everything that you've heard about Republicans is just kind of flipped on its head. So I think that's how you begin to turn those things around in communities like this, is to lay out the indictment, but show your investment and your interest in turning it around as well. And I think that helps people understand that, oh, okay, this Republican is okay.
Okay, next question. Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Come on.
Hi, I think parts of my questions have actually been answered already, but since I waited in line, I'm going to do it. It's 2 parts. You've used the term urban Republican in many instances, and I wondered, what you think it means, or what exactly it means to be an urban Republican. And then the second part is, what specific policies and programs do you see Republicans targeting at urban areas that the Democrats don't?
Well, I think being an urban Republican is basically being a pioneer, you know, just because there aren't very many of you, and you do have to, you know, you can't necessarily tell everybody that you're a Republican when you meet them. You know, like your next door neighbor, you might not necessarily lie, but not exactly tell her who you are. So you put your signs up and then, whoa, that was an amazing day. A lot of that, that is what it is. It's being Republican. It's saying, you know, like, it's saying that I still believe in all these things, but I like the environment. I like the city, you know, and I'm willing to fight for my city. Is kind of what being an urban Republican is to me.
I was going to say, I coined the phrase hip-hop Republicans. And when I did, I scared a lot of people. Because there were several articles written and people anonymous, there's so many anonymous sources that I had to deal with as chairman. But this one anonymous source expressed concern about this idea of hip-hop Republicans and wanted to know, does that mean that we all now have to wear bling? Which I found insulting.
Yeah.
And very ignorant on their anonymous part. Because what I was talking about and what a lot of folks in the black community understood me to be talking about, those who wanted to be honest about it, was very much what you were saying, bringing the party into the neighborhood and accepting it as we find it. Warts and all, blessings and all, and taking our principles and applying it to their circumstance. Not telling them, well, you need to believe or you should do, but saying, this is how we can help. We believe that if you had more money left over after paying taxes, you could do A, B, and C. We believe if you had fewer regulatory hurdles to overcome in opening your business, you could do A, B, and C. So we're looking to be partners with you. Very different kind of conversation. And so to your point about which policies, those are the policies. Economic empowerment, educational reform.
Can I ask one brief follow-up on that? So those sound great. Those are parts of the Republican agenda that I think a lot of Democrats could embrace. But where do you stand on the so-called family values side of things, part of the Republican Party that does not support gay rights or other issues like that, which I think urban areas tend to be more liberal in terms.
Right, and that's a real challenge for the party right now. It is called adapting to the new realities in politics. Those issues weren't dominant 30 years ago. They are today. So how do you adapt, and where does your philosophy come down in that point? People forget that the pro-life plank in the platform, when was it put in the platform? 1980. 1980. We act as if it was there when the party first opened its doors in 1854. But the party adapted to what was going on in the country with the emergence of this religious conservative perspective, and that's fine. But the reality of it is, and from my perspective, as a pro-life Roman Catholic, I see the party's roots as being much more libertarian than anything else, which recognizes the freedoms of individuals to make decisions and choices. And that's why we are so much concerned about what government does. Case in point, for me, one of the lowest points, and there were several over the last 10 years, was when the party's leadership, House and Senate, White House, got behind this idea of the Terry Schiavo case, where the government was going to insert itself into a very personal decision made between a husband and the parents of the woman who was comatose. Government has no space there. has no place there. Regardless of how I feel about that, regardless of how she may feel about that as a Republican, we do not get to tell you, certainly as government, that you need to do it this way. What we respect and what we fight for is your right to make those decisions. And that part of what this party was founded on has gotten lost over the years, in my estimation. And so what happens? Because I hold this view, I'm a rhino. But I consider that view to be very conservative because it respects fundamentally the rights of that individual and protects that. That's what conservatism is, protecting that right. And that's unfortunate. And that's part of the challenge we have now as a national party and as a state and local party, is to deal with this new environment in which all of these questions get asked. I mean, as chairman, I was told by certain members of the Family Rights Council and this council and this group that the party had to, go and push these agenda. And I would leave that meeting and I would come over here and I would meet with people who would say that the party shouldn't be pushing that agenda, that the party needs to push a different agenda. And so we've tied ourselves up in knots. I don't want to be a part of a party that has a litmus test. There was none that, at the time I joined, and there should be none now. And we should embrace individuals as we find them. If you decide, sir, or you decide, ma'am, or you decide, ma'am, that you want to be a Republican, I'm like, come on, the tent is big, it's wide open, and bring all that you are with you. Because there obviously is something that you have seen in us, that you have seen in our documents, in our philosophy, that attracts you. How dare I stand here then judge you on your way in the door? Are you pro-choice? Are you pro-life? Are you pro-gay? Are you anti-gay? How dare you? How dare I? How dare us as a party? That's not who we are. We've never been that way. And that's been part of my problem as chairman, was saying we shouldn't be that way. And I don't think we should be that way, because that's not the Republican Party I joined at 17.
I'm Shahid Morris. I'm a Trenton resident. I'm 23. I would like to thank Chairman Steele for taking the time out to come. I would also like to thank my good friend Kevin for a great film. The film posed a question that has been ignored for many years. And my question, I'm more of an independent. I voted for Barack Obama. I worked during his campaign. And my question for Chairman Steele is, during Obama's campaign, he was able to motivate the young people. And what can the Republican Party do to motivate young African Americans towards the Republican Party?
Wow. Well, for me, I've always found it to be important to engage young people instantaneously. In other words, when I'm at a Lincoln dinner, the one thing I note about this dinner is that the young people, if there are any there, are usually sat in the back of the room at a table way in the back. Our young Republicans in the corner over there, our college Republicans, after they do all the work, yeah, you get a free meal, but you're not recognized, you're not appreciated. So what I started doing was very simply having everyone who was under the age of 40, and I always chuckled at the old gentleman who would stand up, and I let him stand, but everyone under the age of 40 stand up and look them in the eye and tell them, as your national chairman, I hereby give you permission to no longer have to ask for permission to be active, to run your party. This is your party now. Take control of it. Don't wait until you're in your 30s or into your 50s or your 60s to run for office. Run now. You want to be a national chairman? Run for the job. You want to be a county chairman? Run for the job. You want to run for the city alderman or councilman? Run. Stake your claim, because you have a vested interest right now in the future of this party. This is no longer your mama and your daddy's Republican Party. I give it to you. And that message, I think, is a very empowering and powerful message that all of us should be taking to people who are young men and women who are coming into age politically, to let them know that this table is their table. They have a seat at this table. They will help chart the future course of this party, to help grapple with the issues we were just talking about, for example, because their experience in an age where it's instant communication, social networking, is vastly different from mine. And so what they will be able to bring to the table in communicating that new message of economic and personal empowerment is going to be better received coming out of their lips and from their heart than from my lips and my heart. And so we need to find a way to empower them. Yes, get them engaged in the social events and have them help us with our Lincoln dinners. But instead of sitting at the table taking the tickets, how about putting them in charge? How about having them be the co-chair of the dinner so that they can learn and get that experience of running something that's important to the local party? Those are the steps that I think we begin to take before we get up to this national thing where we get everybody out there and we do all that stuff, because it really starts incremental steps at the local level.
Thanks.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to congratulate the team for having this seminar. It's a very good conference. My name is Carl McCall. I'm from Ewan Township, 28th District. Mercer County has had Republican leadership before, county executive freeholders, and we also had senators elected from the 15th District. My concern is the national and the top leadership not providing enough funds for these candidates to go into our urban areas, put their message out so that they can be more receptive, so that the voters will know what the message is all about. It appears to me that we're not taking enough initiative to go into the urban communities to pass our message, not only during election day, but through the whole year.
No, you're right. And a quick answer on that is, and I was struck by Catherine's story in the movie, because what Tammy and Kevin did not get into there was the backstory on her fundraising and the way the system is set up right now and designed for a candidate, particularly at the congressional level. She talked about the NRCC, the National Republican Congressional Committee. You go to meet with them, the first question they ask you is, how much money have you raised? The threshold is $250,000 for a congressional campaign. The problem is, that applies to every congressional race in the country. So a congressional candidate running in this area versus a congressional candidate running in a wealthier congressional district has a totally different dynamic in fundraising. If you're representing or want to represent a largely urban, poor community, raising those funds from within that congressional district become very, very hard. You're not going to raise $250,000. So when they would come to me as national chairman in the last campaign, I would ask them, okay, that was not the first question I asked them, was how much money they raised. The first question I asked them was, do you really know what you're about to do? Because the expectation, and I said this to Chris Christie the first time we met, 30 days into the job, he comes into the office as a candidate running for governor, and he asked for support and help. And I said, I have one question for you. Are you prepared to do what you have to do to win? Because if you're not, I'm not giving you a damn dime. If you are, if you're going to truly be a different kind of Republican, and that means run in areas where you're not expected to show up, and you got people whispering in your ear, you don't need to go over there, like Christine Todd Whitman's people used to tell her, and she would ignore them, then you get what you need to do. But when you got to the money portion for that congressional candidate who's coming from a largely urban, poor congressional district, you lower the bar. Because first off, you don't need that much money. $250,000 in that kind of congressional district is the same as $1 million. It would go that far. So you lower the bar. You make it easier for them to reach those milestones so that they can then feel the party's investing in them and helping them. But candidates also, as I would tell them, don't come to me thinking I'm a bank. That just because you're a Republican that I owe you a check. It doesn't work like that. Because there are some districts and some races where you are absolutely going to lose. So then there is the consideration of, do we make the investment in Tammy's race knowing she's going to get her clock cleaned because she's running in an area where she's outgunned 14, 15 to 1? Or do we use her race as a test race where we can begin to test some themes and some ideas and some messages? So we'll put a little bit of money in knowing she's going to get her clock clean, God bless her. But we have a chance to use that congressional race or that senatorial state district or whatever as a testing ground for us to check some of the ideas in a community that is right now not responsive to us. That's where the party needs to take its next thinking. It's just not there. And so these old models are still part of the construct of running campaigns. And try as I might to deconstruct as many of them as I could, the fact of the matter is the state parties then is the key level here. Getting the state parties to begin to look at these races, less in terms of can you win, and more in terms of, is this an opportunity for us to reach a new constituency? Caring less about the win and more about establishing the relationship that can lead to a win in future elections.
That leads me on to another point, because I gotta be fair to the guy.
I'm paying a babysitter a lot of money tonight.
No, I just gotta elaborate on part of the question, answer you gave us, because when we had the 15th district was part of Hamilton Township, even though you might have lost in Trenton, you could have been a loser winner because you would have took votes by putting more money, or a candidate in Trenton with more money taking votes away from the Democrats and giving more votes, to the Republicans, because you took the votes away, you balanced it off. So it appeared that when they stopped concentrating on Trenton and influencing the vote in Trenton, they completely lost.
Look, the question is the party in this state, in this area of Trenton, whatever, needs to ask themselves, when you're dealing with your outnumbered, what's the number here, 14 to 1? The question isn't you're going to win in Trenton. Hell no. Okay? We know that. Okay, fine. So that's, okay, we stated the obvious. Now let's move on. What can we do here? Well, there's a lot you can do here. There are a lot of arguments that can be made. There are a lot of steps that can be taken. A lot of things that you can do politically. It's part of the infrastructure of politics. And ask yourself, if you look at politics from not, can we win, but sometimes you have to ask yourselves, how much can we afford to lose by? Because in my district, and when I ran for Senate and for Lieutenant Governor in Maryland, 3 jurisdictions determine the outcome of every election statewide. Baltimore City, Prince George's County, Montgomery County. Period. That's it. You can win everything else in the state. I mean big. Those 3 jurisdictions clean your clock. So what did we do? We looked at Prince George's County, the most wealthiest black community in the country, concentrated. African Americans, 85%. Median income, $65,000. Okay? All Democrat. 5 to 1 registration. So I looked at the numbers and I go, okay, the best a Republican can do here on a good day is 32%. So how much can we actually afford to lose by? What is that number? Because you're going to lose it. You're not going to win it. So what do we got to get to? All right, you got to get to 38. Okay, so I need to find 6%. That's all I need. Because the ripple effect is what I'm looking at. We found the 6%. We need to win it. Problem is, Republicans think you got to win it all the time. And you don't. And so because you think that way, you look at Trenton and you go, oh my God, don't go there. Because there's no win there. Yes, there is. So in a statewide election, how much you're typically going to lose Trenton by. So instead of losing Trenton 68, to 32, how about losing it 60-40? Or losing it 62-38? Fine, because the ripple effect is what you ultimately are looking at. Yes, sir. Next question.
Real quick, my name is Roland Laird. Real quickly, given the fact that the black community probably votes, 25% of registered voters actually probably vote, why would you look at any area and say that you are outnumbered when the pool of, even if they're registered Democrats, they're not voting? Why would you not think they would be up for grabs?
If I could just jump in on it, when we had, I believe, the last mayoral, we had a brand new mayor, full 7 spots on city council. The participation rate was 13%. And I'd say after President Obama's election, I believe it increased the voter rolls by 14,000 in the city. It's unbelievable. We were knocking on doors to stop a water deal, which was a big thing to happen. We had to get petitions signed. Tammy and I went out, we were one of the groups doing it. It was amazing how people, you would knock on a door, ask you what party you are. We said, we're Republican. They didn't slam the door in our face, but then it would tell you, you're the first Republican I've ever met. And these are 60, 70, 80-year-old folks, as well as the younger folks.
Well, but that goes back to the earlier point that was made about what the party's prepared to do to actually go out and get the votes that they want. I mean, so when you have a mindset that says that this community is written off, then they're not going to come when you have these opportunities to get his vote, because they're going to say, well, why? We don't win in Trenton, so why are we going to? So it's a special election, big whoop. What does it mean to us? Reestablishing the value of every community for the party is central to the party building itself from the grassroots up. The Republican Party's problem, of which there are many, is that they tend to still look at their politics from top down. I cannot tell you the meetings I sat in as national chairman at the beginning of that little thing called the Tea Party, trying to get these people to understand what that movement was all about. And that was when it was nothing. I'm talking February of 2009, March of 2009. I would go in the meetings, I would say, there's a whole lot of pissed off Republicans out there. And they're like, really? Where?
Where's the devastation having its greatest impact?
Does 2006, 2008 mean anything you have any understanding? So when you have this ability to put the blinders on and look at communities like Trenton and say, then yeah, to the gentleman's point, they're not going to necessarily focus resources and energy that, quite frankly, are minimum. I mean, if you've got a 13% turnout in a special election, do you know what you can do with that? Do you know? I mean, your voter turnout, because in that situation, in a special election, there's a lot of ticked off folks on the other side that you can go capture and bring to your argument. So just make the effort. But the problem is people don't believe that it's doable. And when we as a party start believing in that, guess what? We lose. We go the way of the Whigs. And my prediction is, given the trajectory on, 10, 15 years, could happen. Because we're not looking at the growth of Hispanics, African Americans, women, as political forces. And we're writing them off. Or we're making false assumptions. And the awakening will come, presidential cycle 2016. A lot of people think it's down. No, we'll muddle through 2016, because by then you're looking at a nation that will be majority minority. And the Republican Party will not be at the table.
Final question. Kevin, could you just comment on who did this design here?
This is really cool. There's a great local artist. We live in a neighborhood called Mill Hill. It's we call it the Greenwich Village of New Jersey. Named Jean-Claude Michel. He's a phenomenal artist, originally from Haiti. And he came up with it. He needed a necklace for Valentine's Day, and Tammy makes handcrafted jewelry. So she said, well, I'll trade you a necklace if you'll make our poster. So he came up with this.
That was an awesome deal.
Negotiated like a true Republican.
So let that be the final word. Please give them a round of applause. I thought it was a phenomenal job.